Two of California's most notorious unsolved crimes, the 1947 Black Dahlia murder and the late 1960s Zodiac killer spree, have long seemed unrelated. But now a stunning new theory claims they were committed by one and the same man. It sounds like the plot of a noir thriller, but a self-taught codebreaker named Alex Baber insists he has literally cracked the code, tying these cases together. The Black Dahlia was the nickname for Elizabeth Short, a 22-year-old woman brutally murdered and dismembered in Los Angeles in January 1947. The Zodiac killer murdered at least 5 people in Northern California in 1968 to 69, and sent taunting letters and ciphers to newspapers. Both cases shocked the nation and remain officially unsolved decades later. Now, Baber believes he's found the missing link. Baber became obsessed with the Zodiac's mysterious ciphers, especially the short 13-character cipher known as Z13, which begins, "My name is," and was mailed to the San Francisco Chronicle in 1970. This cipher stumped even expert cryptographers for generations. Using artificial intelligence and custom algorithms, Baber says he sifted through millions of possible names, cross-checking each against details from the Zodiac case, like suspect descriptions and public records. After months of work, one name emerged as the best fit: Marvin Merrill. That name might have meant nothing to police, but it meant everything to Baber. Marvin Merrill was an alias for Marvin Margulis, a man with a direct tie to the Black Dahlia murder. In 1947, Margulis was actually on the LAPD's suspect list for killing Elizabeth Short. He was a 21-year-old USC pre-med student and World War II Navy medic who had briefly lived with Short a few months before her death. Margulis at first lied to detectives about knowing Short, then admitted they'd lived together for 12 days. Shortly after Short's gruesome murder, Margulis left Los Angeles, moved to Chicago, and changed his name to Marvin M. Merrill, making it harder for police to keep tabs on him. He had expressed a keen interest in surgical practice and had a history of psychological instability and aggression, traits that seem chilling in hindsight, given the surgical mutilation of Short's body. According to Baber, it's no coincidence that the Zodiac cipher yielded Margulis's alias. He believes the Zodiac killer was none other than Margulis himself, living under a new name. It's irrefutable, Baber said of his discovery. In his view, the same man who killed Elizabeth Short in 1947 re-emerged 2 decades later as Zodiac, hunting victims in Northern California and taunting authorities with clues linking back to his first crime. Baber and his supporters point to several pieces of evidence they say connect the dots. An eerie sketch. In 1992, near the end of his life, Margulis, as Marty Merrill, drew a sketch titled Elizabeth. It depicts a nude woman with grotesque injuries, uncannily similar to Short's mutilation. One breast even appears to have a severed nipple, and the name Zodiac is supposedly hidden in the shading. They view this drawing as a cryptic confession by Margulis, openly naming Elizabeth Short as a victim and sneaking the word Zodiac into the art, as if to say, "Yes, I was Zodiac too." Medical and anatomical know-how. The Black Dahlia killer clearly had surgical skill. Short's body was cut in half cleanly at a specific vertebra. Margulis, a Navy corpsman who had assisted battlefield surgeries, had the training to perform such a precise dismemberment. That gruesome expertise links his background to Short's fate. Investigators note that Margulis even threatened violence after the war, saying he'd kill anyone who tried to send him back to combat, and showed signs of severe trauma, which could hint at a disturbed mind capable of extreme crimes. The Zodiac motel clue. On the night before Short's body was found, a young man was reportedly seen desperately trying to rent a Los Angeles motel room with a bathtub, claiming his wife needed it, presumably to clean up a crime. The motel he visited? It was called the Zodiac Motel. If Margulis was the Dahlia killer, he might have literally been in a place named Zodiac while dismembering Short's body. Baber's team sees this as a darkly ironic clue the killer left behind, perhaps inspiring the Zodiac moniker years later. Cipher and code links. Baber's big breakthrough is the Z13 cipher solution itself, finding Marvin Merrill hidden in Zodiac's code. To bolster this, he enlisted veteran cryptographers to review his work. Ed Giorgio, a former NSA codebreaker, examined Baber's description and said, "All of Alex's work checked out to me." In fact, Giorgio and two other ex-NSA experts not only confirmed the name fit the cipher, but one discovered an even stranger twist. The Zodiac cipher was apparently constructed using the keyword Elizabeth. That means the cipher itself may incorporate Short's name as a key, a hidden nod to the Black Dahlia case built into the Zodiac's puzzle. If true, it's a mind-boggling secret message linking the two crimes. Detectives on board. The theory has impressed some in law enforcement. Rick Jackson, a respected retired homicide detective who worked both in LA and the Bay Area, reviewed Baber's research. "In my opinion, these are solved cases," Jackson said, asserting that there are too many links between Dahlia and Zodiac and that Margulis left breadcrumbs all along. Jackson and his former LAPD colleague, Mitzi Roberts, who once oversaw the Black Dahlia cold case, both believe Margulis is a very strong suspect. Roberts noted Margulis had been among the top suspects in the Dahlia case and said Baber's work put a new spotlight on him after years of the file gathering dust. To these seasoned detectives, Baber's trove of clues, from ciphertext to sketch art, makes a compelling argument that one man was responsible for both the Black Dahlia murder and the Zodiac killings. In short, the new theory paints Marvin Margulis as a calculating killer who struck in 1947 and again in the late 1960s under the guise of Zodiac. It's a narrative almost too wild to believe. A war-traumatized medic turned Los Angeles murderer who decades later becomes a Zodiac code-writing serial killer. This hypothesis has generated enormous intrigue and media attention. But is it actually true? Now we turn to the skeptics. Part 2. Scrutinizing the claim. How likely is this really? The idea of one culprit behind the Black Dahlia and Zodiac cases is extraordinary, and many experts and observers are highly skeptical. Larry Harnish, a veteran journalist and one of the foremost historians of the Black Dahlia case, didn't mince words about the Margulis theory. He essentially called it tabloid fodder. Killings separated by many miles, years, and different methods become related in the public imagination. Are the Black Dahlia and Zodiac cases related? No, they are not. This is the sort of ruined temples on Mars story you'd see in Weekly World News. In Harnish's view, this theory is a sensational reach, not a legitimate breakthrough. He also points out that LAPD files actually cleared Margulis decades ago. A 1949 police summary shows Margulis and a roommate were investigated and eliminated as suspects in Elizabeth Short's murder. In other words, detectives at the time found nothing solid tying him to the crime. That by itself doesn't prove Margulis innocent, but it shows that this isn't a forgotten suspect with obvious evidence against him. He was scrutinized and let go for lack of leads. Beyond expert opinion, the facts of the cases raise serious doubts about one person committing both sets of crimes. Consider the huge differences in modus operandi and circumstances. Completely different crime patterns. Elizabeth Short's murder was up close, gruesome, and targeted. The work of someone with intimate access and a very twisted anger. She was tortured, surgically cut in two, drained of blood, and posed in a vacant lot. The Zodiac killer, by contrast, was a prowling predator who shot or stabbed strangers at night and fled. He never mutilated his victims or showed any surgical behavior. The Zodiac killings were essentially thrill or attention killings of random young couples and a cab driver. These two MOs are night and day apart. Entirely different and incomparable, as one observer noted. It's difficult to imagine the same individual committing both. Most killers have a consistent pattern. Radically changing your victim type, methods, and motive from a sadistic personal crime to a public spree for fame is unusual, to say the least. Timeline and psychology. It stretches credibility that a murderer would kill in 1947, then wait 20-plus years before killing again in a brand new way. Serial killers typically don't take 2-decade breaks. Margulis would have been in middle age by the Zodiac period, around 43 to 45 years old, whereas witnesses at the time repeatedly described the Zodiac as a man around 25 to 35 years old. For example, people who saw the suspect near Zodiac crime scenes described a stocky young white male, likely in his 20s or 30s, not someone in his mid-40s. Margulis's age in the late 1960s and his appearance, had he been scrutinized, might not have matched those descriptions well. Additionally, if Margulis was the Dahlia killer, he had successfully gotten away with that crime and avoided attention. Why would he resurface decades later in such a high-profile, attention-seeking way? The Zodiac reveled in public notoriety, sending letters, ciphers, and making phone calls to police, while the Dahlia killer, whoever it was, did not engage in the same sustained cat-and-mouse with the media. It's a major psychological leap to go from an extremely secretive murderer to one who craves the spotlight under a pseudonym. One retired investigator remarked that there's too much on the surface with Margulis, having been a known suspect, for him to risk the flamboyant cat-and-mouse game that Zodiac played. The Zodiac, he argued, likely led a very quiet double life and protected his identity fiercely, something that wouldn't jibe with Margulis's history and personality. Questionable breadcrumbs. Many of the supposed links in Baber's theory can be interpreted in less sensational ways. The Zodiac motel connection, for instance. Yes, it's intriguing that a Zodiac motel existed and that Short's presumed killer was hunting for a bathtub in that area. But was the motel's name really a factor in anything? That detail wasn't widely publicized. If Margulis was the killer, only he would know he visited a place called Zodiac. The theory assumes he chose to name himself after that. A very meta inside joke that no one would catch for 78 years. Skeptics say this is likely coincidence. A guy calling himself Zodiac in California and a Zodiac hotel even within 100 miles is not a connection, one commenter argued, noting that lots of things have the name Zodiac and it might mean nothing at all. Likewise, the 1992 sketch. Margulis's drawing is creepy, but art can be interpreted in many ways. Unless Zodiac in the shading is crystal clear, the public hasn't seen the image to judge. It's a subjective clue. It could be the doodlings of a disturbed man haunted by something, or it could just be Baber's team projecting meaning onto it. It's far from a signed confession. Cipher skepticism. Baber's entire case hinges on the Z13 cipher solution, and many experts find that tenuous. By all accounts, a 13-character cipher is extremely hard to solve definitively. It's simply too short to yield a unique decryption. You can manipulate those symbols to produce numerous names or phrases. In fact, some in the Zodiac community suspect the cipher was never meant to be truly solved. Perhaps it was a taunt. One cryptography enthusiast bluntly stated, "The 13-character cipher is impossible to solve. More than likely, his name was not even there in the first place." In other words, Baber might have found a solution, but it's a huge leap to say it's the solution. Without a Zodiac's original encryption key or more context, there's a risk of seeing what you want to see. Could Marvin Merrill appear in the jumble by chance? Possibly. Other researchers over the years have come up with different solutions for Z13 that pointed to their own favorite suspects. The use of Elizabeth as a supposed cipher key is also suspiciously convenient. It assumes from the start that the Zodiac cipher is linked to Short, which is exactly what Baber is trying to prove. Critics consider this somewhat circular logic. No hard proof. Perhaps the biggest issue: there is no direct forensic evidence tying Margulis to either the Zodiac crimes or the Black Dahlia murder as of now. All the breadcrumbs are circumstantial. There's no DNA match, the Dahlia killer's DNA is unknown, and Zodiac's partial DNA from stamps hasn't been matched to Margulis or anyone else publicly. There are no fingerprints linking Margulis. Zodiac did leave fingerprints on a letter and at a crime scene, but they haven't matched any known suspects. Handwriting comparisons, which have been used to evaluate Zodiac suspects, have not been reported in Margulis's case at all. Essentially, Baber's theory hasn't produced a smoking gun, just a lot of intriguing anecdotes and coincidences. Law enforcement agencies, so far, have not publicly embraced the theory. The Los Angeles Police Department still considers the Short case open and unsolved, and there's been no announcement from Bay Area police that the Zodiac case is closed either. As one San Francisco Chronicle reporter noted after reviewing Baber's claims, only the police can definitively close these cases, and that hasn't happened. It's also worth remembering that this isn't the first time someone has come forward with a solution to these infamous cases. The Zodiac case in particular is notorious for attracting armchair detectives with pet suspects. One Reddit user joked that the Zodiac killer gets solved more often than a daily Wordle puzzle. In 2021, a group called the Casebreakers loudly claimed a man named Gary Post was the Zodiac. That made headlines for a week, then fizzled out when the FBI and others disputed the evidence. Before that, others were convinced a former school teacher or a wealthy landowner or some random long-dead guy was Zodiac. None of those theories held up under scrutiny. The Black Dahlia case, too, has seen famous accusations. A retired detective insisted his own father, Dr. George Hodel, was the killer in a best-selling book, and while some find it convincing, the LAPD has never confirmed that or declared the case solved. In short, history urges caution. Just because a theory is elaborate and attention-grabbing doesn't make it true. Always mistrust true crime stories where famous cold cases are solved, one commenter wisely said. It's sound advice. In the end, Baber's one-killer theory is an intriguing intellectual exercise that has certainly revived interest in two cold cases, but many experts believe it's far from proven. The narrative of Marvin Margulis as a criminal mastermind linking the Black Dahlia and Zodiac crimes is exciting, yes, but it may be more of a storytelling coincidence than reality. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that level of evidence hasn't emerged here yet. As Larry Harnish and others remind us, the simplest explanation is usually the best. It's more plausible that the Black Dahlia and the Zodiac killer were separate, unrelated crimes, each horrific in its own way, but not part of a grand connected plot. Until concrete evidence surfaces, say a DNA hit, a verified confession, or a long-lost file that definitively links Margulis to these murders, this theory will remain in the realm of speculation. The Los Angeles and San Francisco police are aware of Baber's claims, but there's no indication yet that they consider the cases closed. So for now, Elizabeth Short's murderer and the Zodiac killer appear to be two different ghosts of the past. Baber's work is a fascinating footnote, and it certainly adds a new chapter to the lore, but it hasn't rewritten the whole story. The Black Dahlia and Zodiac cases stand as enduring mysteries, and linking them under one culprit might ultimately be, as Harnish suggested, More evidence of our imagination's magnetism than of the truth. Conclusion. The theory that a single killer was behind both the Black Dahlia and Zodiac crimes makes for a dramatic story, but the weight of evidence, or lack thereof, leads most to conclude it's highly unlikely. It's a reminder of how tempting it is to connect unsolved crimes, and how, in the absence of hard facts, even the most intriguing theory can turn out to be a mirage. Until proven otherwise, skepticism is healthy. The Black Dahlia murderer and the Zodiac killer will likely remain separate legends of crime. Two dark tales that, for all we know, only intersected in a West Virginia codebreaker's computer analysis, not in reality. Do you want to bring bad things with you wherever you go? Our episodes are now available as a podcast. Look us up on your favorite podcast app and listen to the most truth-seeking true crime podcast out there.